It's time for the Brian Batty Real Estate Show.
Good morning, Charleston, and welcome to another edition of the Brian Batty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. Gosh, 14 years, I think. I've been on this program helping you guys better understand the real estate market and everything that's going on within it, not just what's happening here locally. As somebody that's sold real estate for the past 20 years, I've sold about 1,500 homes, a little more, about $1 billion worth of real estate here locally. And so I share my knowledge of not just the real estate market, but the real estate process so that you guys are informed consumers. You understand what's happening in the market and you can educate yourself along the way so that when you become ready to buy or sell or invest, again, you're an informed consumer. You know the right questions to ask, and you've taken some time to educate and hopefully entertain a little bit along the way. So I want to start today with a question. You know, when you hear about, like tensions with Iran and rising oil prices and global instability, do you kind of just assume like, that's happening over there, it doesn't really affect me? Because if that's kind of what you're thinking, I don't think you're alone. I think there are a lot of people that are just kind of shut off to what's happening right now, but you might be, kind of missing something important here, because when things like this are happening, halfway across the world right now, it's quietly influencing, obviously, like what you're paying at the pump and what you're paying at the grocery store and what interest rates are doing and ultimately what your home is worth. And so today, I kind of want to connect those dots for you. I want you guys to understand where this market is kind of headed. We'll talk about where we are right now, not in a complicated way, but in a way that kind of actually helps you understand what's going on, why the housing market feels the way it does, and most importantly, what you should be doing about it. Because I think in markets like this, the difference between making a great decision and making a costly decision usually comes down to kind of understanding what's really happening behind beneath the surface. And then obviously the person that you choose to link arms with and help you throughout this process, through this transaction. So let's kind of zoom out for just a minute here. And Iran, it sits in one of the most important regions in the world when it comes to energy, right? And when tensions rise in that part of the world, markets react quickly, right? Not because something has necessarily happened, but because something could happen. And markets don't wait, right? They price in risk immediately. So why does this matter, right? Because roughly 20% of the world's oil supply moves through that passage called the Strait of Hormuz, right? Anytime there's tension involving Iran, there are concerns about that supply being disrupted. And the possibility alone can drive oil prices up. And when oil prices go up, everything else tends to follow, right? Transportation costs increase, shipping costs increase, businesses pass those costs along. And, kind of before you know it, you're paying more for just about everything. That's inflation. That's how we have been feeling for the past several years. Not just feeling, but doing, right? We're writing the checks. We're swiping the card at the grocery store, and it's, the prices have gotten a little out of control. So here's where it kind of hits closer to home. All right. When inflation is elevated or even just expected to be elevated, the Federal Reserve obviously has to be careful. They can't just rush in and cut interest rates, because if they do, they risk making inflation worse. So, instead, they hold rates higher for longer. And that right there is where real estate starts to feel the pressure, because mortgage rates obviously are heavily influenced by these broader economic factors. So even though you might be watching the news thinking, this doesn't really affect me, or, it absolutely does, right? Because it's influencing the cost of borrowing money. And when borrowing money becomes more expensive, it changes behavior. Buyers become more cautious, right? Sellers become more hesitant. And the entire market just starts to slow down, right? Not crash, but slow down. And if you guys listen to my show and you heard me say that this year is going to be just a normal kind of quote unquote boring, non-drama filled real estate market. Well, I didn't know we were going to throw a potential war into there, but even with what's going on right now, kind of what was projected is starting to come true, right? If you've been paying attention to the Charleston market, you've probably felt that, right? Homes are still selling, right? Demand is still there. It just doesn't feel as fast or as easy as it did a couple years ago. And that's not by accident, right? That's the result of everything that we just kind of talked about. Now, most people hear that and they think, okay, so things are harder, right? Got it. But here's the part that almost nobody really talks about, and it's kind of what's happening right now. It isn't just creating challenges; it's creating opportunity, right? But not the kind of opportunity we're used to looking for. Again, this isn't a crash. We're not in a market where everything is becoming a fire sale because prices are dropping so dramatically, like we were trying to sell in markets in 2008 and 2009, probably into close to 2011. This is something that's really much more subtle, right? It isn't a global shock discount. And here's what I mean by that. When people hear about global instability, they don't always react logically, right? They react emotionally. They hesitate, they wait, they second guess. And when enough people do that at the same time, it creates these small little cracks in the market, right? Not massive ones, but meaningful ones. And so let's just give you an example, right? Instead of selling a home in 3 days, maybe now it's taking, 23 days, right? So instead of sellers holding firm on their price, maybe they're a little more flexible. Or instead of a buyer competing against 5 other buyers, maybe they're only competing with 1 or none. So, let me kind of ask you something, right? Do you think these shifts show up in headlines, or do they just kind of show up quietly in things like negotiations, which is what we're seeing more and more of? Because what I see every day isn't really a collapsing market. It's a market where leverage is just starting to shift, right? Just slightly. And I think that in real estate, small shifts in leverage can create some really big opportunities. But I think it's only for people that really recognize them, right? Because while the average person is kind of sitting there thinking, I'm going to wait until things feel a little more certain, or, guys, I run a real estate company. I have several people that work for me. I actually have several real estate companies, a property management company, a private money lending company, an investment company, and my real estate sales company. And we talk with folks all the time, right? With different needs and different stages, with different time frames and levels of motivation and so on and so forth. But we hear a lot right now, we're just going to wait for the market to kind of calm down a little bit and figure out which direction it's going so that we can make a move. And I think the informed buyers are the ones that are stepping in, and the prepared sellers are the ones that are positioning themselves correctly. And the investor is they're paying very close attention right now. In February, by the way, South Carolina was the number 2 state in the country for mortgage delinquencies, just behind Indiana. So when you go and you kind of compare that to what was going on during the market crash of 2008, just as a quick sidebar, Indiana was like number 31 or 35 on the list of states with the most foreclosures. Now they're number 1. South Carolina wasn't even really close to being top 5. Now they're number 2. So you see where all these markets have received a huge amount of inbound relocation. We're starting to see some cracks, right? Because uncertainty creates hesitation, and hesitation creates opportunity. But if that's true, if the opportunity is starting to show up, then why does it feel like so many people are stuck, right? So when we come back, we're going to talk about why the market feels stuck and what you can do about it, right? So, if you guys would like to reach out to me, you want to have a conversation with me off air about the concept of working together, maybe you just have a general real estate question, or maybe you need, a good contractor or insurance agent, feel free to tap into my network. I mean, I've spent my entire adult life building this group of vendors and this hopefully 5-star world-class experience when people work with my real estate company. So if we can help you in any way, or our property management company, or maybe you're looking for investments, you'd like to have us manage your investments in real estate, then feel free to give me a call. I'd love the opportunity to chat with you off air. My number is 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Or you can check out our website, listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. I'm your host, Brian Batty, and we are talking about really the state of the market today, what's going on with this potential war in the Middle East, and what's going on with oil and how it's impacting the market and why the market feels stuck. A bit of a continuation from the most recent show that we had, quite honestly, but I'm going to tell you why things feel different. And again, kind of connect these dots as to what's happening in the market and why it feels stuck. So just very briefly, if you'd like to reach out to me, if you have questions about the market, if you want to work together with me as your personal real estate agent, maybe you'd like our help in managing any rental properties that you have, or just have a general knowledge question, feel free to reach out to me. My number is 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Or check us out online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. So I'd say that this is where things start to get interesting, because right now we're dealing with what I call, obviously, the golden handcuffs effect. You guys have probably heard this before. You've probably heard me talk about this before, but millions of homeowners across the country are locked into mortgage rates in the 2s and 3s. And now they're looking at today's rates, 6.5%, 7%, sometimes higher, depending upon the scenario. So even if they want to move financially, it just feels like a bit of a step backward. And so what do? They stay put, right? Even if the house doesn't really fit them anymore, if it doesn't really fit their needs, they've outgrown it, they know they need more space, they have too much space. It's tough to maintain it. There's a bunch of different reasons why people obviously want to move, and not every reason to move is a happy, opportunistic reason to move. And that's why you're still seeing, inventory on the market, is that not everybody can control those set of circumstances, right? And so if they stay put, even if the house doesn't fit them anymore, or even if they'd prefer a different location, or even if they're thinking about downsizing or upgrading for years, they stay. And when enough people do that, inventory stays low, and that's exactly what we're seeing in Charleston. So let me just kind of ask you something, right? If fewer people are selling, what happens to the people who want to buy? They have fewer choices. And when buyers have fewer choices, prices tend to stay more stable than expected. So now we've got this kind of strange dynamic where the market isn't crashing, but prices are holding, but activity feels slow and just low in general. And that's what creates this feeling of being stuck. But here's the real question. Are people actually stuck? Or do they just feel stuck because, they haven't been shown another option? Because what I see almost every day is people making decisions based on incomplete information. They're assuming, well, I'll just wait for rates to come down, right? But let's think about that for a second. What happens if rates do come down? I don't think they're going to, but what happens if they do, right? Does demand go down, or does it surge, right? It surges, which means more competition, which means upward pressure on prices, which means the advantage that exists really today, right now, starts to kind of disappear. So, the question kind of becomes, are you waiting for a better market, or are you waiting for a more competitive one? So, and while all this is happening, by the way, there's another issue that I'm seeing right now, and that's costing some homeowners, I think, a significant amount of money. And I would say that this one is really important. Honestly, it's something we've talked about before, because it's happening right here in Charleston every single day. Homeowners are pricing their homes based on what the market used to be, not what it is today, right? They're looking at, what their neighbor got last year, or what Zillow says, or what they hope the market still supports. But the market has shifted, right? Not dramatically, and it's not really in a way that's making major headlines in terms of the actual shift in the real estate market, but enough that pricing strategy matters more than ever. And here's what happens when a home is priced too high. It doesn't really get ignored completely, but it does get overlooked, right? Buyers scroll past it. They wait, or what they'll do is they'll watch, right? They'll click on that little save button on whatever website they're looking at your home on, and then basically say like, all right, well, I'm going to pin that for now. We're going to put a pin in that property for now, and we'll wait for that price to become more realistic before I express any serious interest, because there are too many sellers out there that are just not reasonable with regard to their asking price. That's not necessarily coming from me. That is coming from the buyers that are looking in this market right now. They can sniff out an overpriced listing pretty easily because most of these folks are looking in areas where there's not a ton of inventory. I mean, there are, of course, areas of our market where there is plenty of inventory. I mean, go to Somerville and look for a $500,000 home. You'll find a lot of them. But what they'll do is they'll wait and they'll watch. And obviously, from the seller's perspective, days on market starts to add up. Then comes the first price reduction, then the second, and now the property has lost something very, very important, which is momentum, right? When you first put your property on the market, you're marketing to the pool of buyers that are ready, willing, and able. They're researched. If the right property hits the market, they're going for it. The second group of people are just the people that enter the market because something has changed in their life, right? We're constantly refreshing this group of people that are now ready to very seriously consider buying a house, right? Well, obviously, at some point, we're going to exhaust that group of people that are ready, willing, and able to buy a house right now. They've looked at it. They've looked at it online. They've looked at it in person. They've made an offer or not. And that's why when we meet with sellers, we talk about these metrics and things that we're shooting for, right? We need some targets to hit. We know, based on analytics we have access to, how many showings we should be getting per month in different areas and price ranges, right? That becomes kind of our barometer. If we're not hitting that, then the market's telling us something. If we're in excess of that, the market's telling us something. The question is whether or not we're willing to hear it, to listen to it. Because once a home feels stale, then obviously buyers start asking, different questions. What's wrong with it? Why hasn't it sold? And then when offers come in, they're just not that strong offer because they're cautious, they're conservative, they're looking for a deal. And what ends up happening is that the homes often sell for less than what it would have if it had just been priced correctly from day one. And I don't just say that to sound like a realtor. We hired a company and paid them a lot of money to provide our real estate company with statistics that our board of realtors does not provide. And one of the things that we analyzed in significant detail is the impact of your initial asking price on the ultimate bottom line you receive when you sell your home. And the statistics are overwhelmingly positive for the person that prices their home basically in line with fair market value. They sell it for 100% of asking price in a week. That's the stat from at least the fourth quarter. Obviously, we don't have first quarter numbers yet, but that was from this most recent fourth quarter of 2025. Whereas those that did not price their home correctly and had to take a price adjustment in order to kind of get back into the fast lane, their days on market shot up to almost 3 months, right? They're getting, in some instances, around 91% of their original asking price. On top of that, we're in a market where, and I mentioned this earlier, I think in the last show, but literally 1 in 3 homes that are put on the market for sale right now are not selling. And what I mean by that is they're being removed from the market. Not just they're sitting there for a while and they're just not selling. They're being taken off the market after trying. Now, that could be because They changed their mind. They can't get their price. They decided to rent it. They hired the wrong real estate agent. Whatever the case may be, 1 in 3 properties is going on the market and then coming off the market. It's really about 3 in 10, so it's not quite a third, but you get the point. There are plenty of people out there that are trying to sell their home using last year's pricing and using outdated marketing methods. And there are plenty of folks out there that have done a good job over the past couple of years in like refreshing their marketing, but the overwhelming majority of real estate agents do the same thing. They put it in the MLS. Once it's in the MLS, it goes onto all these websites that consumers use, right? Zillow, Redfin, Realtor.com, Homes.com, you name it. Maybe they do an open house. They put a sign in the yard. Maybe they post something on their personal Facebook page, which is just a bunch of like random people from high school and college that they're probably not even friends with, certainly not home buyers. And then that's it. And if it doesn't sell, then you know what happens next. They ask you to just reduce the price because that's really the only available tool in their tool belt. They don't really have ways of generating new interest organically or proactively for your house. And so that home that lists with one of those agents usually comes off the market and then goes back on the market with another agent. And before COVID, before we got to this market where all you had to do was put a sign in the yard and somebody would buy it, that's how crazy the market was for COVID for several years. But before that, when we had a normal market, 60% of the listings that we sold were previously listed by other real estate agents. So we have a knack for rebranding property, but also just tells me that there's not a lot of branding or marketing or advertising going into marketing a home for sale these days anyways by the majority of agents that sell real estate. And I could harp on this a little bit longer, but I'm going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about this and again, connect the dots and also talk about what's happening right here in Charleston. So stick around. This is the Brian Batty Real Estate Show right here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. And remember, if you guys want to reach out to me, you want to have a private conversation off air with me personally, my number is 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Or check us out online, listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. And also check us out on YouTube and Spotify and iTunes and all that great stuff. All right. I always like to take a moment and just tell you all that I appreciate you for listening to this show. It's been a great run. Happy to continue it. 14 years on this program, helping you guys better understand the real estate market and the process, educating you guys so that when it comes time for you to buy or sell a home, you know what to do. You know the right questions to ask, and hopefully you know the right person to use too. So if I can help you in any way with regard to real estate, management, investments, sales, we kind of do it all. Feel free to reach out to me, 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065 or listingsincharleston.com. So when I took a break, we were talking about the fact that, the market is in fact slowing down, right? It is a normal market, maybe a little slower than normal because markets tend to overreact when there's major shifts. And what's interesting is that we haven't really had a major shift, right? We're kind of looking for the culprit. We're looking for the reason why the market feels the way it does. And, I've mentioned that we're not really seeing a spike in inventory. We're not seeing a huge decline in demand. Our inventory is slowly rising, but prices are being held stable right now. You just have to understand what that price is. That's the really important thing, is what's the actual price that your home is going to sell for? And who can really help you identify what that price is based on current market dynamics? Not what happened last year, not what your neighbor got last spring, the here and the now, right? And we were talking about the fact that a lot of people are missing the mark right now. Almost 1 in 3 people are missing the mark. And what I mean by that is that 1 in 3 homes that are listed for sale come off the market, right? They fail to sell. And that's a pretty high number. That's not what we've seen, obviously, over the course of the past several years. And so it creates frustration and hesitation. And, it impacts, of course, the homeowner's strategy when it goes to selecting an agent and ultimately selling their home, right? You've got price, condition, marketing, and motivation as the main 4 things that sell a house. And the motivation might be there, but maybe the advice or the direction that the agent is giving is just a little off the mark, or maybe it's antiquated. And I'll just give you an example really quickly. All right. So I had a meeting. Let's just say I had a meeting, right? I won't say when, but I had a meeting where I was the second agent to meet with that particular homeowner. And like I've said before, I applaud those that interview agents so that they really have something to compare and contrast, right? Let's have an apples to apples view of who's the best option for me. And so anyways, I'm the second one through, and we go through the process, right? We're having the conversation, and then ultimately it gets to the point where we're going to have the conversation about what their home is worth. And so I'm very, I guess I'm very hands-on when it comes to discussing home value, because that's really probably one of, if not the most important part of the conversation. That's really what they want to know is, how much can I sell my home for? How much do you charge in commission? What does your marketing look like? What does your agreement look like? What does working with you look like, right? Those are normally the majority of the questions that people have, or at least the major ones. So we get to the point where we're talking about price. And so I bring all of my information. You guys get to see the raw data just like I get to see it straight from the MLS. And then we have conversations about what those homes have that yours don't, or vice versa, how that impacts value. We look at days on market. We look at identifying the price that's going to not only cause showings, but cause offers. And it is a true customized conversation. Well, anyways, I'm meeting with this homeowner, and we get down to the value, and I say, we go through the process. I'm showing them the comps. I'm showing them how I would make individual adjustments based on some of the features that they had or don't had. And they say, well, that's interesting because the other agent that I met with said a number that was a lot higher. And let's just make up a number. Let's say it was $850. And I think it should be listed at $750. Now that's $100,000. That's a big gap. So I asked the homeowner, well, I mean, I would think that there's two major reasons why an agent would have that opinion of value for your house. And the first would be that they are just misinformed, right? They're not looking at the right information. But we all have access to the same information, so it can't be that, right? The only other reason why an agent would tell you that is because they want your listing, and they're going to tell you what they think you want to hear to get you to sign the agreement, right? And a lot of agents have gotten really good at talking that up, right? Well, let's go for more. I think you can get more. I think that's too low. I think they probably just want to take your listing and sell it really fast and move on. I'm a real hands-on approach agent. I'm getting cinematic here, but you get the point, right? The only reason that somebody would say something that outlandish and just incorrect is because they think they can convince the homeowner that you have their best interest in mind by telling them a higher price so that you hire them, and then they spend a month or two trying to market the property, and they say, hey, it's not working. We need to reduce the price, which is the game plan all along. I mean, in our industry, it's called buying a listing. And it's happening, obviously, a lot, right? Again, 1 in 3 properties are not selling. So when those properties start to get stale and stagnate, right? Again, buyers are asking, what's wrong with it? Why hasn't it sold? The market's not that bad. Why has this been on the market for so long? And then they make very conservative, borderline offensive offers because they want to see how motivated you really are. And maybe they just don't agree with the listing price that you've set. We have plenty of agents that submit offers that say, here's why we're offering what we're offering. At least that's what we do on our team. We justify it, right? We justify our position. We don't look at making offers based on how much people are asking. We make our offers based on what that property is worth. Somebody can ask whatever they want for their house. It's my responsibility as a real estate agent to determine what it's actually worth and then negotiate from there. I see people missing this step all the time. Well, it's listed at $650. Do you think we could offer $625? In my mind, and I don't say this, but I'm thinking, like, who cares? What's it actually worth? Let's do an analysis to determine what this house is actually worth, and then let's negotiate from there. Maybe it's only worth $615, right? So we offer $625, feeling like we beat up the seller by $25,000, when in reality, we just still overpaid $10,000, right? That's what I'm getting at here. That's it. You have to be working with somebody, I think, in this market right now that really understands the direction, the trajectory. And it sure would be nice if you had an agent that had been selling real estate like this market right now previously. And I've been doing this for 20 years, but when we look at kind of the impact of all of this, let's kind of bring all of this together. We've got global instability impacting oil, impacting inflation, impacting interest rates, and shaping kind of the behavior within the housing market. We've also got this kind of subtle opportunity window, and it's created by hesitation, right? We've got a market that feels stuck, but might not actually be stuck. And we've got sellers making, quite frankly, avoidable mistakes because they're relying on outdated assumptions or information or plans, right? So the real question is kind of where do you fit into all of this? Are you thinking about moving but unsure if it makes sense? Or are you wondering what your home would actually be worth in today's market? Or are you just trying to figure out whether now is the right time or the wrong time to make a move? Because here's what I can tell you. The people who make the best decisions in markets like this, I think, are the ones that take the time to understand their options, right? So if you want clarity, you can just text the word strategy to 843-800-0065. Text the word strategy to 843-800-0065, and then we'll come up with a time that makes sense to have a conversation about what's going on in your life and whether it might make sense for you to consider a move, right? And what that looks like and how we're helping people right now make sense out of this market, but I think more importantly, take advantage of the opportunities within it. So feel free to call or text 843-800-0065 or go to listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. And we'll walk you through it. You know, no pressure, no obligation. I think just a clear plan based on your situation, because I think that, you know, when the world shifts, the market follows, and when the market moves, we'll make sure you're ready, right? So thanks for listening to the Brian Batty Real Estate Show. We've got one more segment, so I'm going to take another quick break. We'll come back and wrap things up. But again, if you want to reach out to me, have a conversation about what's going on in this market right now and how we're helping people take advantage of some opportunities that exist, which might not be around for very long. Again, call or text 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Or check us out online at listingsincharleston.com. Thanks again for listening this morning as we try and, I guess, make sense out of the world right now as it relates to real estate here in Charleston. I know that's kind of a big ask, but hopefully you guys gleaned something from that was of interest. I think that just, again, to kind of wrap things up right now, the market feels hesitant, a little uncertain. The numbers are, I would say, within what I would call a normal, quote-unquote, market range. But there are some nice opportunities that exist. What I want to talk about for the last few minutes here, I think is, frankly, it's a really stressful part of buying or selling a house because it takes you kind of out of your wheelhouse, right? If you're not a contractor or if you're not somebody that consistently, writes checks for repairs to be done to homes, it can be extremely overwhelming when you look at the inspection reports that these home inspectors provide buyers when they're under contract to buy a house and they get a home inspection. And I just have to say that this is where a lot of people either lose the deal or lose their you-know-what because of the cost associated with the repairs that they agree to, sometimes even agreeing to it before they understand how much things are going to cost. This is a major point in the transaction where you can either win or lose a lot of money on both sides, on the buyer side and on the seller side. I can't tell you how many home inspection reports I have viewed. It has to be well in excess of 10,000 at this point. But there are some things that come up on these inspection reports almost every single time. And let me also just say that, home inspections aren't just for homes that are older, right? To try and uncover major issues that you might be able to see with the naked eye. I can't tell you the number of issues we have found in new construction properties. Every single new construction home that our clients have bought has had some sort of issue that needed to be repaired. So just as a quick sidebar, if you're buying new construction, don't skip the home inspection, right? It's just really important. And I know that, a few years ago when the market was red hot, like 2020, 2021, and everybody was buying property sight unseen and waiving inspection rights and waiving appraisals, some people got into really big trouble financially, not ethically or from a license perspective, but I'm sure there are plenty of those that got into trouble too for not disclosing things. There's too much going on in the market. But the home inspection process can be extremely overwhelming. And if you don't understand how much things cost, it can just really freak you out, right? So I want to caution people that are about to be in the market, and for those of you that maybe have recently bought or sold something maybe over the past few years, you can certainly agree with me on this, in that the home inspection report in and of itself is overwhelming. Because, we just got an inspection report earlier this week. It was like 230 pages. I'm not kidding when I say that, 230 pages. Now, it's a big house, but it was a big report. I'm going to take off a week to read that thing. But anyways, what I want to talk about with regard to inspections is that I personally think that now is the time for sellers to start doing pre-listing inspections again. I think this is where a lot of sellers get caught off guard, because when we have conversations about selling the property and we're talking about the breakdown of all the expenses associated with the sale, we've got to deduct things like commission and your closing attorney's fees and your deed stamps and your prorated property taxes, so that we can come up with what the gross proceeds would be. And then we deduct, of course, your mortgage balance, if any, to come up with the amount of cash or equity you actually have in your house. And so we do these home equity analyses for folks at no cost or obligation, of course, just to help them understand, like, hey, here's what you're actually looking at in terms of real money locked into your house. After it's all said and done, when you sell the property and you've got your expenses taken out, you pay off your mortgage, here's what you're left with, right? And so these people that are selling homes obviously are doing financial planning. They're trying to make decisions on what to do next once they sell their home with the proceeds they get from it. And if a major repair that was unknown to them becomes known during the inspection process, you either have to fix it, more than likely, or you have to disclose it to any other buyer if that deal falls apart. Because that's the thing that I think really hurts a lot of people, is if you don't figure it out, so to speak, and figure out a way to negotiate, then you as the homeowner are now obligated to disclose the results of that home inspection to any potential new buyer. And of course, they're going to take that information into consideration when they make their offer. So again, this is where a lot of money can be won or lost. What I'm offering, just to be clear, is that anybody that gives me a call from this program, I will provide them with a free pre-listing home inspection, right? That could be a $500 to $700 value right off the bat, to help you guys identify any issues that might come up during the negotiating process that obviously negatively or adversely affect your bottom line. We want to try and get ahead of that stuff. We want to have conversations that say, hey, all right, we've got the pre-listing inspection report back. Let's go through this and let's figure out what makes sense for us to fix versus what makes sense for us to quote. And the reason we do that is because we want to know how much all this stuff is realistically going to cost to fix. Not what the buyer's contractor thinks it's going to cost to fix, because that is almost always a major challenge, right? Is a buyer will get a home inspection done. They'll share the results of the home inspection, and then the buyer's going to say, like, well, we're going to get some contractors out there to give us some quotes so that we figure out how much all this stuff is going to cost to do. And then the quotes that come back are always just like outrageous. But you wouldn't know that, or your agent wouldn't know that, if they're not experienced in things like repairing homes, right? I'm a real estate investor. I flip property. We look at God knows how many home inspections and do a lot of real estate transactions. So I know, generally speaking, how much these items that we identify are going to cost, or at least the range at which these things are going to cost, so that we can have some pointed conversations. But we want to get ahead of that so that things don't happen like what happened to us last week, where a buyer says, hey, you need a new roof. We got a quote. We want $28,000 off of the asking price. This is a 1,500 square foot house. We got a $28,000 roof quote. What's that guy going to do? Put on the roof and then spend the rest of his year in Aruba? Like, that's a ridiculous price for a roof. But again, if you didn't know, you didn't know. So I think it's incredibly important right now to not get, frankly, taken advantage of on either side of the transaction, whether we're buying a house or selling a house, when it comes to repairs. So for those that are listening, if you are interested in selling your home and working with my real estate team, we will provide you with a free pre-listing home inspection as part of our offer. Now, if you'd like to discuss that in greater detail, you can give me a call, 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Or you can check us out online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. The last thing that I'll say before I end the show is that let's say we do find things on this pre-listing home inspection, but you don't have the cash on hand to make these repairs. We have just secured a deal with a company that's private to us that allows homeowners to do up to $50,000 worth of repairs or renovations to their home and then pay the balance at closing. Now, you do have to pay 1% of the project cost per month. So if you're borrowing all $50,000, it's $500 a month. But this is an incredible opportunity for folks to not get taken advantage of, that maybe they're in a position where they know their home needs repairs. They know it could use a spit shine. It could use a refresh, but they just don't have the money for it. Well, this is a solution to that, and it's not collateralized. So it's an incredible opportunity. If you'd like more information on that, again, reach out to me, 843-800-0065, 843-800-0065, or listingsincharleston.com. You guys enjoy your weekend. Thanks so much for listening to the Brian Batty Real Estate Show right here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com.
Join us for another edition of the Brian Batty Real Estate Show next Saturday morning at 9 and Sunday morning at 10. Find him online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. Or call him at 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065.